Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of The Log Show here on YouTube. And I feel like everything is up and running pretty well right now. So I hope everybody over here on the YouTube that is tuning in can see me, and it's all running well after these few weeks of technical difficulties. I think I got it figured out, guys. I think I finally did it after weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of just messing it up. I figured it out, and I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of myself. So we have a lot to talk about. So much as the Super Bowl is here. We are in the week of Media Week has started. They had their whole opening night or on Monday night, so last night, and we are in the week of the Super Bowl as we will see the New England Patriots face the Seattle Seahawks, a rematch of the infamous Malcolm Butler interception game this weekend in Santa Clara for Super Bowl 60. I am so excited for that one. Not only that, we have UFC over the past 2 weeks, 324 and 325 were both so exciting. And I mean, guys, now that football is a little bit over and I'm starting to feel comfortable and Paramount is going, look alive for my UFC picks on my social media. I've been on a heater recently with UFC. Shout out all my guys over there that helped me bet. Shout out my boy Jared. Shout out my boy Mike over there who all helped me bet. We've been hitting crazy on UFC recently. I have been 6 for 6 over the past 2 weekends. Knock on wood as I talk about this heater. But stay tuned for that as I talk about what has been going on over in the UFC with some major wins over the past 2 weeks in some numbered events. We get back to a fight night this week. But yeah, we are in Super Bowl week as well as we saw the Broncos fall to the Patriots in the AFC Championship 2 weeks ago. We saw the Los Angeles Rams fall to the Seattle Seahawks 2 weeks ago in Seattle. And here we are in a matchup that sees Sam Darnold be the first quarterback since Joe Namath to make a Super Bowl after wearing a Jets jersey. So obviously Aaron and a few guys have made Super Bowls before their time as a New York Jet, but after their time as a New York Jet, there has been nobody since Joe Namath to start a Super Bowl, and now Sam Darnold will be that first name as well as being the first name in the 2018 quarterback draft class to be selected, or that was selected and now has started in a Super Bowl, made it before Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, some other guys who you expect not to be on that list. But those are the three big names who were also drafted in 2018 that Sam Darnold has now won the race to go win a Super Bowl. And I mean, guys, when we go back and talk about those championship games, I think a lot of people are going to go back and talk about that Bo Nix injury, and that's something I do want to talk about, at least for right now, for a little bit. I'll get into the Knicks. The Knicks have been hot recently, so I'll talk about them being 6-0. I'll talk about UFC and all that. But since it was a long time ago now, I kind of want to just talk about what I felt about those those conference championship games, both of them actually, and really break down what is going on for the future of both of those teams and what we can maybe see going forward. As you know, I've looked at a lot of things. I think next week we'll have a lot of fun with it after the season ends in my postseason show, looking at what my predictions were and looking how awful they were, because they were not good this year. I was off with a lot of teams this year, a lot of teams that I thought were going to do very, very poor, really hit their stride this year, and I'll admit it. I was very wrong this year. I thought it was going to be another old year that we had seen over the past 2 years, and the same old teams that have been good were going to be good. You know, maybe we saw the Bengals get back or something like that is really how I felt going into the year. But that's not what we saw, and here we are in a situation where, you know, I look very, very wrong. And that's just the truth of what happens here when you talk about sports and you watch as much football as you do. Sometimes you get comfortable with your picks and comfortable with what you're seeing on the field, and it's time that change happens, and change did happen this year along the NFL, and it was highlighted in both of those championship games, seeing the Seattle Seahawks be back at home, seeing a team like the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots face off, two teams with second-year quarterbacks. That are extremely, extremely young. You know, Mike Vrabel in his first year there in New England, and Sean Payton there in year 3 in Denver, or 4, I believe. but very, very, very early in his career with Bo Nix, in his second year with Bo Nix there, able to make a conference championship, even though Bo Nix was unable to start that. And we'll get into that in a second, too, with that whole ankle injury. But I do feel that, we are seeing some changes in the NFL. We're seeing some of these younger quarterbacks really hit their stride, and maybe some of these teams that feel like they might need change now that their younger quarterbacks are no longer younger quarterbacks, and in teams like Buffalo, where we're seeing them fire Sean McDermott and hire Joe Brady, give him the promotion. And we're seeing that in Baltimore with firing John Harbaugh, and Pittsburgh, and those guys all trying to reset and find new regimes over in what they're doing. I mean, I want to include Pittsburgh and Tomlin, but they end up going with McCarthy, so it's interesting to see how that goes. But obviously, like I said, you see Baltimore goes with a young guy in Jesse Minter. You see teams like that are all trying to hit a new era and find a new stride and a newfound message to send to the team, because the one of the veteran head coach was no longer landing, and they are at the time where the Super Bowl window is now. They are hitting the top of the parabola, as you may say. They're hitting their peak, and these teams now have to look elsewhere. And that, like I said, has been highlighted where, you saw 3 of the 4 teams that were in the conference championship this year be teams that not a lot of people expected to be maybe as good as they were. I think there were 3 teams that people expected to do well this year, but I don't think anybody had Drake May and Mike Vrabel in their first year together doing with the magic that they have done, winning the AFC East, being the number 2 seed, fighting for that 1 seed consistently throughout the playoffs, going to make a Super Bowl. And I feel like a lot of people also didn't feel that way necessarily about the Seattle Seahawks and Sam Darnold. I think a lot of people had Sam Darnold written off going into Seattle, me included, honestly, when you look back at going into this season and how Geno Smith was able to do well in Seattle and stuff like that, and Kevin O'Connell has been good with so many other quarterbacks. Anybody who went into Minnesota did so well. So a lot of people felt like when Sam Darnold went and got his own team, like some of these other Minnesota quarterbacks have done, he was going to decline and he maybe wasn't going to do as well. And he didn't do that. He stepped up and he played just as well this year. Was the first quarterback since Tom Brady to get back-to-back 14-win seasons with 2 different franchises, and impressed a lot of people. And it leads to this Super Bowl 60 matchup that we see here that I'm very excited to see. We have 2 teams that are very, very highly ranked defensively. We have 2 teams that are some of the most explosive offenses in the league, between Drake May, Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, Trayvon Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, and that very, very, very well put together and well coached O-line over there in New England. And on the other side in Seattle, where you have pieces like, obviously, who was the best receiver. You have the best receiver in football this year in Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have Sam Darnold, the way he's been playing. You have Kenneth Walker, who has been a top 5 running back, in my opinion, this season, if not top 3. You have also explosive players like Raheed Shaheed and a lot of pieces on around him that can make plays. You have reliable targets for Sam Darnold in your tight ends there in Seattle, and a lot of pieces like that I'm excited to see how the Super Bowl turns out. I think that what Mike Macdonald has been able to do there in Seattle over the past couple of seasons is a testament to his mind and how well of a head coach he is, and what he has been able to build there in Seattle. And I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm extremely, extremely, extremely excited to see how this matchup turns out, because, like I said, I mean, we have a team that, like in Seattle, is second in yards, in third in yards per game, second in points per game. Patriots defensively are 4th in points per game. Seattle defensively is 6th in total turnovers this year. Like, it's just a lot of pieces that I see, and a lot of good storylines that you can see going into this Super Bowl that I'm excited for how it's going to turn out. I think it being in Santa Clara just helps the offensive be able to get going. It being a warm weather game outside, it's going to be nice this weekend, and It's a big thing for New England to be back. I think a lot of people have their eyes on what Drake May and New England can do, and I think a lot of people are rooting against them. And uh, I'm gonna give my pick at the end of the show as and give another light breakdown at the end of the show when I do my picks for this. But I do think when we look at the Super Bowl matchup, it's a very, very close matchup. And I think a lot of the things online and a lot of what you're seeing with the lines starting to come out and all of that, you are seeing that a lot of people agree with that sentiment. I don't think it's a very crazy sentiment. I'm saying that this is definitely going to be a close game between the two. I as of this morning, DraftKings has Seattle minus 4.5 and the over at 45.5. I think I'd smash that New England plus 4.5 if I could, and I'd smash that over if I'm going to be completely honest. I think, or actually, I'd smash that on. The over under does get me. Okay, I'll be honest there. If we're gonna talk betting for a second, I will say that over under when it comes to this game will get me. With the point it's at, they have that at a very good line at 45.5. I do think that Super Bowls tend to be low scoring and more defense oriented. So I like my gut tells me to lean towards the under, but 45.5, I will say, with how high octane these two offenses have the potential to be, I think is a very interesting line. Don't get me wrong, but um, when it comes to everything that I'm seeing about New England and how people feel about it just feels like they're almost getting written off because it's Vrabel's first year there, and because the pieces don't feel as explosive as Seattle's defense. But I still think that you have a lot of good pieces and you have a defense that can cause a lot of turnovers there in New England. They have the most turnovers out of any team in the playoffs. I think obviously that number is propped up a tiny bit when you have that game where CJ Stroud throws for, you know, 8 yards or whatever, or 4 interceptions in the first half and has that atrocious game and does all that terrible stuff. So I think that number is a little propped up, but nonetheless, you still are looking at a Patriots defense that has been able to cause a lot of turnovers in the playoffs and was able to fight a hard-fought game in Denver where the weather was up and down and left and right and all over the place, where by the start of halftime it still looked like a sunny day, and by the end of the game the whole field was white and you couldn't see where you were throwing the ball. And they were able to get out of that one, squeeze out of that one. Yeah, it was close. Yes, Denver didn't have their starting quarterback in Bo Nix, and you can come up with whatever excuses you want for Denver, but at the end of the day, New England was able to come out of that game with a win in a slow-paced, hard-fought game where I think that shows a lot for what can happen in this big game. And I know to a lot of people who might come by this when I say it like that and I look like the way I'm thinking, I don't really look like I know what the fuck I'm talking about sometimes. But it's just the way my brain processes it. And it's like when you really think about it, and with the New England's defense, I feel like, yes, a lot of people will go through New England and talk about how Mickey Mouse this year was and how they had one of the easiest schedules in the league. And they played, especially at the end of the year there, they had that run where they played pretty much the entire top 10 of the NFL draft for 10 weeks straight. And a lot of stuff like that. And I think it has put in the mind of a lot of people sentiment against the New England Patriots that they're not as good as everyone thinks, and people want to be rooting against them because who wants to see this team back on top after everything that we saw with Tom Brady, and we were so tired of it, and we thought they were finally going to be in despair for so long. It hurts a lot of us diehard football fans to see New England back in the Super Bowl, and I completely understand that. But when I really look at this game and I look at how a lot of people are viewing New England, like this defense hasn't played in the playoffs like a legendary defense, like one of the best defenses in the league, you'd be wrong. I mean, they had CJ Stroud, who, yes, over the past 2 years has not been the best quarterback, but also over the last few weeks going into that game against New England was lighting teams up and playing extremely well. And the defense of New England made it look like CJ Stroud was seeing ghosts. They completely shut down every part of Denver and that game plan for Jared Stidham last week. They've done it time and time again, this New England team, and they've won a lot of close games, and I think they've done that on the back of their defense a lot of times, as well as Drake May has played. As much as Drake May has been an MVP candidate all season and will probably finish second in MVP voting, I think that this New England defense is a very underrated defense, and I think that's what might get them over the top against Seattle this week, because it's a defense that not a lot of people are talking about that have a lot of good pieces. Like when you really look at the New England Patriots and what they've been able to do defensively, like I said, they're fourth in points allowed. They're sixth in total yards per game. They've ranked ninth in EPA, and I do think that you go down this depth chart, and I'm gonna bring it up because outside of Christian Gonzalez, it's just names that I need to be reminded of, but they're names that I've been hearing throughout the playoffs. Milton Williams has had a good playoffs. Carlton Davis has had an insanely good playoffs. Like I said, Christian Gonzalez has been a top corner in the league for the past 2 years, even though he's been injured over the past. He struggled with injuries last year and the year before, but he has been, when healthy, one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and he's been playing well. And a lot of the pieces on this defense have been playing well, especially that front seven with Milton Williams and Christian Ellis and I can't pronounce his first name, but Chason. They have those pieces there that have been impressing me throughout the playoffs that statistically don't necessarily always jump off the paper and haven't all year, but they're stepping up right now when time is big. And I think when we look at this game, that Vrabel's been a great coach. He's been able to coach this O-line that, again, it's a young O-line. You have a rookie left tackle. You have, I believe, a second-year left guard, or is your third-year left guard. You have a young center. It's a young O-line. It's one that Vrabel has been able to get the best out of this year. So it's those pieces. It's the inside. It's the pieces that when football gets down to its nitty-gritty, it comes down to your offensive line and your defense. And I think that might prevail for the New England Patriots going forward, and that's where I'm leaning as we go. But as the week goes on, who knows how I feel. Obviously, I'll be 50-50. The pieces of the Seattle Seahawks offense definitely will definitely jump off the paper to me. I'm not going to lie there when you have JSN, who this year has been the best wide receiver in football, and it hasn't even been close. Puka Nacua was the second best receiver in football, and the gap between JSN and Puka Nacua this year, in my opinion, was astronomical. Kenneth Walker, yeah, you lose Charbonnet, who's your red zone threat, but Kenneth Walker, again, another player who has been absolutely unreal this year. Leonard Williams has stepped up for that defense. Excuse me. And there's a lot of fun pieces on that Seattle defense or on that Seattle team that stand out to me, but I like that a lot of people are counting out the New England Patriots. It doesn't happen often, and I know they don't have Tom Brady anymore and all that, but I think a lot of people are sleeping on New England a little too hard, especially now knowing I thought that line would be at 2.5, 4.5 seems like a lot. A lot of people. If you're counting out New England that much, I think you're sleeping on how good this New England Patriots team is and how good this New England Patriots defense is and how well they have performed in the playoffs. Like I said, people will blame CJ Stroud for that performance in the divisional round, but I will also give a credit to the New England Patriots defense, who was in his face consistently. They were having fun, and the Houston Texans came out and said that we had no idea how to stop it. We had no idea what they were doing or how to stop it. We were lost. We were lost out there. Like, when you have a coordinator saying it, it's not necessarily just CJ Stroud's fault or coach. I don't necessarily know it was the coordinator. I don't remember who exactly it was. I know it was a coach on the Texans that came out, like a staffer on the Texans that came out and said that, like, we were lost. And that's accredited to that defense. And they've played like that throughout the playoffs. And I think they'll continue it in Santa Clara this weekend. Whew. But, yeah. I mean, bro, football's over, man. It sucks. Football's over. I mean, a lot of news coming out in football. There's that huge news with the New York Giants and Steve Tisch apparently being in the emails. He has been revealed that Steve Tisch was emailing with the notorious criminal Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not big on talking about that type of stuff, but obviously if it gets into our world, gets into the sports world, it's going to be a topic, especially here in the state of New Jersey when we're so close to New York and in where I live in WFAN and listening to all of that. It's obviously going to be a big talking point and has been over the past couple of days. The NFL released a statement that I didn't love the statement. It was a very quick honest state. It was very a quick kind of not sweep it under the rug, but we don't really want to talk about this right now type of statement when you have that whole it's a bad situation. I mean, obviously it's not proved the age of the women that he was asking for, but you know, there's a whole thing with it and it's not good. Obviously there's no place for that in our sport. And the NFL needs to do a proper investigation. Whatever punishment should happen, like whatever legal punishment that may or may not happen to this guy, I think that the NFL should really look at ways to remove him from having a hand in the New York Giants, him being a co-owner there. It's an odd situation that the NFL has a lot of pressure on them now to handle because obviously this goes now further past the point of, you know, football and all of that. This is something that has been talked about through the country. They've been asking for who is in these emails and all of that for almost, it feels like almost 2 years now. So obviously him being on that list of names that was revealed this past weekend is a huge deal, and how the NFL will handle this will be under a gigantic spotlight from all of media sources around the country, around the world. And I think everyone can easily agree that there's no place for this man in football, and whatever the NFL needs to do to remove him from the New York Giants, whether that be forcing him to sell the team, whether that be legally relinquishing the team, whatever that is, I think is a big situation I think that's a bigger point because obviously everybody knows how big of a point it is that he is on the list. I don't think that can be over exaggerated at all, but I think the big thing is going to be how the NFL handles this is going to be under a lot of spotlight and scrutiny, and we'll see going forward over the next coming weeks. Obviously, at the owners' meetings, Goodell had a press conference, I believe it was last night, and he was asked a few questions about it. All of his answers were mostly those types of, oh, we're just gonna, let me pull up the full quotes. You know, here's the article. Yeah, he goes, we'll absolutely look at all the facts. We'll look at all the context of those and try to understand. We'll look at how that falls under our personal conduct policy, and we'll take it one step at a time. Let's get the facts first. Which is an interesting answer, I definitely think, Mr. Goodell. I do think that's a odd answer to give in this situation, but he's going to be under a lot of scrutiny, and a lot of spotlight is going to go to the NFL now post Super Bowl about how they handle the situation. So My opinion is pretty simple. As a pretty simple guy, who doesn't like to dabble in that kind of world of messed up humans and how messed up the world is. Obviously, I think there's no place for it. I think my opinion is one of many, and I think it's the obvious opinion that there's no place for a person like that to be around the sport of football, and around players and families, and he should be locked up forever, whether it be a situation that it be as bad as it possibly can be, or even if it's on the non as bad side of as this situation can get. I think that it's yeah, it's odd, man. It's odd. It's an odd situation, but I think that the NFL has to sit in a room, handle this, and get Steve Tisch out of the New York Giants as fast as possible and go from there. That's just my opinion, though. That's just my opinion. Moving on from the world of football. Actually, before I move on about the world of football, New York Giants made a big move today. I just remember this. So the Giants hired Matt Nagy today as their offensive coordinator, which is big. Nagy was just the offensive coordinator this past 2 seasons in Kansas City. Before that was the head coach of the Chicago Bears before getting fired down there. And yeah, I mean, how can I say this? A very, very interesting situation for the New York Giants, and I think not a bad hire for the New York Giants and what they're trying to build here. Obviously, you lose out on Todd Monken. Um, when that whole thing happens and he ends up going to Cleveland, but you now have the situation of you are building a coaching staff here that is surrounded with a legendary head coach in John Harbaugh, somebody who's won a Super Bowl before and won many games before, has made many playoffs before. And not only that, you also have now built it around some other people like Matt Nagy, who has had young talent before and not really won games, but a lot of people feel under the tutelage of Andy Reid that he really was able to perfect his offensive play calling skills and what he was able to do in his offense. And clearly in the interviews with the New York Giants was impressed. And I think a lot of people, at least from what I have heard around New York and around on WFAN, from callers, from hosts, from people around me, people at my jobs that I work at that I have talked to about the New York Giants, it is definitely a hire that a lot of people are very, very, very happy about. And I think it is one that you should definitely feel positive about, how Matt Nagy has called the offenses in Kansas City over the past year or two, though. Or he doesn't really call the offense over there in Kansas City. It's mainly Andy Reid. So that's where it gets really interesting on how you very much view Matt Nagy, where he is more likely than not going to be calling these offensive plays for John Harbaugh and for this New York Giants offense. So it's going to be a very interesting situation. I think, when you look at what he was able to do when he was in Chicago, he was able to win a Coach of the Year. He was able to have a playoff appearance with Mitchell Trubisky. So as much as he may have not had the greatest time as a head coach in Chicago and as a play caller and all of that throughout his time as a head coach, I think that he definitely proved that he has a lot of talent. And I think it's going to be fun to see what he can do with the pieces that he will have on the New York Giants, with hopefully Cam Scatterbo getting back by week 1, with Jackson Dart, with Malik Neighbors getting back healthy, with whatever other pieces you bring in as the New York Giants. I think obviously a lot of people look at the draft as the Giants and feel that you should possibly be looking at that situation like all right, let's take a step back here and let's go get some weapons or possibly an offensive lineman. Maybe trade back to 9, 10, something like that if you can, if someone really wants to trade up with you, and move on to going to get the best receiver available to pair him with Malik Neighbors and give Jackson Dart another weapon, but that's not Wandell Robinson, or I can't even say Jalen Hyatt. I wouldn't even count him as a weapon. So I think that's the top of the priority list for the New York Giants. Whether you do that in the draft or in free agency, that's up to the front office and what you have now with Joe Schoen and everything going on. I think there's going to be a lot of distractions going on with this New York Giants team with what I just talked about before with that whole Steve Tisch situation. So I think you really have to do a good job if you're Joe Schoen and John Harbaugh at keeping the noise out of the locker room and your personal your day to day with the meetings and the drafting and looking at free agency, and understand that that is an upper echelon, top tier front office situation that is even above the front office of Joe Schoen, and that is for the owner group to handle on their own and not for us to worry about as general manager, as head coach, as players, and relay that message to the players, relay that message to possible incoming free agents and possible incoming draft choices that you want to start talking to. And like I said, really try to build an offense here for Jackson Dart, bring in a few weapons. I think you also have to build the back half of that defense, in my complete opinion. I think you have to get a better starting cornerback out than Deonte Banks and Paulson Adebo. The safety group, I think, needs help. I do like who you have in your front. I think your front seven is one of the best in the league. Don't get me wrong. That's why I don't think you have to necessarily focus heavily on the defense, but I do think the back half of that defense does need a good handful of help. Because obviously when it comes to that front seven, you have players like Brian Burns, who had an absolutely amazing season. You have Abdul Carter, who started to hit his stride at the end of the year. Kayvon Thibodeau, who still has played at a consistently solid level. You have Dexter Lawrence. You have a lot of good pieces there for the New York Giants there in that front seven that I think make a lot of plays. But that back half definitely has to improve and take a step up going forward. I mean, Vin, I think when you look at it and the Giants being a playoff contender next year, playoff contender, yes, I agree with. But I think when you look at that entire NFC North and you look at the New York Giants, right, and you look at the NFC North, you have the Philadelphia Eagles, you have the Dallas Cowboys, you have this New York Giants team that is getting a lot of hype right now, and you even have the Washington Commanders in that division, who yes had a down year this year, but I still think when you look at that division, you can argue that the New York Giants are still the worst team in that division. I think that Jackson Dart is still the worst. If all people are healthy, I think Jackson Dart is still the worst quarterback out of the four. I don't think he's or the NFC East. Sorry. I apologize. I'm focused on you in the chat. Call me out there. Fair call out. Fair call out. Fair call out. This show needs to be better. You're right. I need to be correct on my divisions. I need to be better. This show needs to be better, and I apologize for that. For my few fans out there like you, Mr. Vincent, I apologize. I apologize. But back to what I was saying. I do think when you break down that NFC East, that you look at Jaden Daniels, Jackson Dart, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. I think that Jackson Dart is still probably the worst quarterback in that division. You know, roster-wise, I think you're probably better than the Commanders. Like, you're probably better than the Commanders. If you build correctly, if you go get a weapon, if you If you get enough, if you add a couple pieces to that O line, you build the back half of that defense and bring in somebody who's a mid tier, bottom top, a good cornerback or a young quarterback corner, a young DB who could develop. I do genuinely think that yes, this division is going to be a very interesting one as the season goes on. But I don't, and because I don't think that, like, when I sit here and I break down that division and I say that roster, I feel like that division, everyone is within one step of each other. And by all means, the Commanders can win 12 games next year. And like it could fall in the exact opposite order of what I'm saying next year, depending on who falls where. And you're going to have that situation with the Philadelphia Eagles where they're going to have to figure out what's going on there, who they're going to if they're going to bring back AJ Brown, which is very unlikely in a lot of people's mind, what they're going to do to replace a talent like AJ Brown. You know, like I said with the New York Giants, you have to bring in another weapon outside of Malik Neighbors. You have to fix the back half of that defense. That O-line needs to be improved on at least a little bit. You need to see some sort of step up, whether that be of young talent that might not be yet at their peak for the offensive line, or that be veteran talent that is doing very well. You need to improve there, and then the Commanders need to improve on their front seven, their offensive line. Jaden Daniels needs to be able to stay healthy. Their weapons need to be slightly better. You have a situation in Dallas where you just traded away Micah Parsons for a few picks. You have those picks to use. You then traded them to the New York Jets. You have you brought in, not Leonard Williams, I apologize. You brought in Quinnen Williams. You brought in you got rid of Trayvon Diggs, who I felt was a cancer to that secondary. You got rid of those types of pieces, and you have cap room to sort of move around if you're the Dallas Cowboys and improve the back half of that defense that honestly was very improved the second half of the season compared to the first half of the season. So I think that, yes, by all means, when you look at the NFC East, that all four teams, I think, are 110% playoff contenders. And when we look at, I know the opponents have been released, and I off the top of my head, I don't remember all of the opponents for all four of those teams. But and I know the opponent rankings for hardest strength of schedule have already come out, but I think another thing that also goes into strength of schedule that a lot of people don't account for is when you play teams. A lot of people say it in media and in the NFL. It's been said for decades. The NFL is so close, you know what I mean? Every team is so I can't remember who it was. I can't remember if it was Drew Brees or Phillip Rivers who said this. Oh, no. You know who it was? It was John Harbaugh. It was John Harbaugh in his introductory meeting. Right afterwards, he had an interview with Evan and Tiki on WFAN. Shout out those guys for such an amazing show over there on WFAN. But they were talking to Harbaugh. And Harbaugh was bringing up how football is won in the margins in the NFL. It's won between the margins. What you can do in between each those small little margins that is what separates each team. There's no large margins in the NFL that separate two teams realistically. As much as it may look like it ranking wise, because there's 32 teams in the NFL, the team that's last in yards in the NFL and the team that's first in yards are separated by 100 yards, if that. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's the exact number this year, but my point is it's not a huge, it's one game's worth of numbers that these teams are separated by that changes their entire ranking up and down the board. And it's the truth within the NFL. It's one between the margins. And it's whichever team can win, do those small things in between those margins that are going to get the wins. And on that builds into what matters so much in your schedule and in your strength of schedule is not necessarily always who you play, but when you play them. When you play them is such an important thing. You could play a team that like the Buffalo Bills or like the Kansas City Chiefs or like the New England Patriots, some of these teams at the beginning of the season when maybe in a situation like the New England Patriots, you play them and they haven't really hit their stride yet, and they're still kind of putting pieces together with a first-year head coach and stuff like that. Or on the flip side, you have a team like the Kansas City Chiefs where it was scary to play them at the beginning of the season, but as the season went on, they got injured and they started to fall apart. And teams like or the Indianapolis Colts is the perfect example of that. The team that you played in week 15 of the Indianapolis Colts and the team that you played in week 7 of the Indianapolis Colts was two completely different NFL teams. One of them was playing was playing almost what felt like a 90-year-old Phillip Rivers. I know Phillip Rivers obviously isn't that old. I'm exaggerating. But, they're playing a quarterback that was eligible for the Hall of Fame if he didn't come back. That's who was starting in Week 15 for the Indianapolis Colts. And on the flip side, in Week 7, they were the best team in the NFL with Daniel Jones arguably being the MVP candidate and he being healthy and so much going on, and it all fell apart. So it's not always about who you play, but when you play them. And I think that's going to be a very big factor for this NFC East as you look at everything going forward and their strength of schedules. It's going to be such a close division that it matters who stays healthy and who is healthy and who isn't healthy at the right times, who wins in between those margins and wins those close games. That's who's going to win that division. And do I necessarily think that next year it's the New York Giants? No. Do I think they have a chance to win that division or to make the playoffs? Without winning that division, yeah, I think 100% the New York Giants have a chance at making the playoffs even without winning that division. But I don't think New York Giants fans should be sitting here and feeling that it's playoff or bust already. I think that you should give it time to adjust and give your players time to develop. Give Scadaboo time to get a little bit extra healthy after the injury. Give Dart a little bit more time to develop further in the NFL after, going into year 2 and see how your front office builds going forward around the pieces that you have now in Jackson Dart, Cam Scadaboo, and Malik Neighbors offensively, and Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence defensively. You have a very, 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 very good core right there that is extremely, extremely young, especially on the offensive side. And defensively, those pieces aren't that old either. Some of them are getting on the older side, but none of them are that old either. So the New York Giants are in a very good spot when it comes to this season. A playoff contender, I completely agree with. But I think when you're looking and listening to, Tommy Lugauer on WFAN and the Carton Show and all these guys who I love to listen to and I think do a great job and do a far better job than I do and I look up to and aspire to be where they are someday. But I think some of them as New York Giants fans on New York radio are very, very, very hyped and are giving this Giants team 10, 11, 12 wins already, and you're shooting for the moon with your first shot. And, you don't necessarily have to get there yet. Obviously, the Super Bowl, the moon, whatever. With my analogy, the moon would be the Super Bowl or the 10-win season. You're shooting for that now. But it's okay if you don't get there in year 1. It's okay if you end up this year, 9-8, 9-8, 8-9, 7-10, but losing close games and not losing close games necessarily because you lost them, but maybe because other teams won them, and it's a flip of a coin, and if we bring in this piece or if this injury doesn't happen, I think that's going to be the type of year that we're going to see for the New York Giants going forward this year, and it's going to be it's a very exciting season. I think on the flip side, when you look at the New York Jets, obviously. You said your opinion here in the chat, Vin, about you think that they're going to blow it, and that's a Jets fan who's been beaten to pulp by the New York Jets front office and their misery and Woody Johnson already. And I think that there's a lot that does need to be fixed by the New York Jets, so how that goes going forward is going to be extremely fun and interesting to see. But who knows, man? Who really fully knows what's gonna happen there, going forward? But yeah, I mean, we have the whole off season to talk about it, and I think next week at our end of season show, I have an interesting thing that I'm gonna try to get going for a lot of people. So we'll see how that goes going forward with the off season and everything going forward with the Giants and the Jets and how they build around the two very separate paths that they're on currently. But yeah. Yep. Moving on to the UFC, the good old UFC, which has been fun over the past 2 weeks. The first one I want to talk about is the one from 2 weeks ago, which is UFC 324, which saw us see Justin Gaethje defeat Paddy Pimblett for the interim lightweight title. Not only that, throughout that whole entire card, we saw Sean O'Malley get a win. We saw Waldo Cortez Acosta defeat Derek Lewis, Natalia Silva get a win, Gene Silva get a win, and Umar get his win over Davidson Figueiredo. And I think that when it comes to this whole event and that main card, a lot of those big fights have a lot of implication on the rankings going forward for the UFC. Starting with the Umar Davidson fight, obviously you see Davidson miss weight, but a lot is going on in that bantamweight division with the title fight and Piotr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili, Sean O'Malley, and Umar. All these four all up here in this whole title shot and this kind of quartet that they have going for who's getting the next title shot, who really deserves it. And rumor has it on a podcast in Georgia, Merab came out and said that he already has talked to Dana and guaranteed a rematch before any other fight that Yan gets. It would be the trilogy between Merab and Piotr Yan. And I think the winner of that would decide, in my opinion, who gets the next title shot. I think if you see Merab win, that you lean towards Umar getting a second chance against Merab, where if you see Piotr Yan win, you now have the interesting you might have that interesting storyline, even though this isn't like the WWE or anything where storylines are being fabricated and created, but you do still want to bring in money, and you have that interesting aspect and storyline in the UFC now. If Piotr Yan beats Merab a second time, where it's almost it's almost some weird way of my enemy's enemy is my best friend. And like how my weakness, his weakness is my strength. I don't know. That made no sense. That sounded so weird. But like it's a weird situation of Yan is the perfect fighter to beat Merab, who is the perfect fighter to beat O'Malley, but O'Malley is the perfect fighter to beat Yan. So they're this kind of weird triangle and this weird cycle of I think Sean can beat Piotr Yan on both of their best nights. I think Sean O'Malley can beat Piotr Yan. But I think Piotr Yan on his best night beats Merab Dvalishvili, who I think and Merab on his best night, I think beats Sean O'Malley. And I know that somehow makes no sense, but like it makes so much sense to me in my head and how the UFC has been. And it's like the mentality of how these fighters fight going into each fight and what I've seen in the past is why I feel this way. And I think that, yes, I think Piotr Yan by all means can beat Sean O'Malley. And I don't feel that same way about necessarily Sean O'Malley and Merab. But I think that Piotr Yan likes to fight Sean in a boxing match. I think that he likes to stand up and brawl with Sean. And in that type of fight, I would lean towards saying that Sean's gonna win. So it has a lot that those two fights had so much implications, and then obviously we see Paddy the Baddy get humbled for the first time in his career against Justin Gaethje 2 weeks ago, and that was one that I think. I mean, nonetheless, don't get me wrong, Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, uh, Paddy Pimblett, yeah, in that fight, 110% impressed me. I think he fought very well against Justin Gaethje. I do think that at the end of it, Gaethje was fighting with a vengeance, and Gaethje came out there and wanted to make his face look different, as he kept saying after the fight. And it damage wise, it did look like an older brother just beating down on his younger brother. But I also think that Paddy definitely held his own in that fight and was able to rock Gaethje a few times, was able to stand up with Gaethje, had his moments definitely, and won a round or two within that fight and showed that he is able to hold his own in a big fight against a big name like a Justin Gaethje. And now he's going to take a step back, and I think anybody under him within the top 10 is a viable opponent for the next opponent for Mr. Pimblett and what he has going forward. I think that realistically you have to give him someone who is up there and someone who's talented, that might not be as crazy as Justin Gaethje, but somebody who would be very interesting to see if Paddy Pimblett could get this type of name under his belt and try to get his name back in the title scene. In the yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, to get him back in the title scene, I think when you look at the UFC rankings and you look at who is left there in the under him or even above him, he's sitting there at 5. He was sitting there at 5 after this fight. I didn't check the rankings this morning because I had this all written down from last week because I wanted to pick up on it because I missed last week. But I mean, anybody around him giving him a Benoit Saint Denis who just beat Dan Hooker, I think would be really fun. Giving him a Max Holloway, I think would be really fun. There's a lot of names. Giving him Moiciano or maybe Rufy, one of the fighting nerds. I think there's a lot of those bigger names that are on the lower half of the top 10, starting to sneak into like maybe 11, 12. I think those names get very, very interesting. Dan Hooker after his loss to Benoit Saint Denis, I think I'd like to see Benoit Saint Denis after his win versus Paddy Pimblett after a loss more than I'd rather see Dan Hooker versus Paddy Pimblett, both of them after a loss. Dan Hooker losing to someone who was lower in the top 10 than him. I think if you have those two meet at, 5 versus 6 at, as a co-main or the one right or the fight right before a co-main on a numbered card, I think that would be absolutely a great fight to make looking going forward. And I think when it comes next for Justin Gaethje, I think it's obvious, and it's Ilia Topuria. In my opinion, you have to unify interim belts. I don't like defending interim belts, and I think especially in this division, you have to go away with it. With what's been going on with Ilia Topuria, you have time to let Justin Gaethje rest and recover from this fight. You don't need to get Ilia in an octagon immediately. So I think the next thing for Justin Gaethje, 110%, would be that unifying belt fight against Ilia Topuria to see if he can conquer the matador that is Ilia Topuria and become the lightweight champion and not just keep it an interim belt. But last week we saw 325, which was not as, loaded as 324, but we saw a lot of fun fights. I worked that day, so I was only able to see the last 3 fights on the card, which was the Rufy fight, the Benoit Saint Denis fight, and the main event of Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. I have not gotten around to watching the Talison Teixeira fight, with him beating Tai Tuivasa, which, if I'm going to be honest, when it comes to this card, there's not a lot of fights that really stood out to me. Junior Tafa losing again doesn't surprise me, but again, I didn't really get to watch that fight. The only fight that I wanted to go back and watch was the Talison Teixeira fight. I just never had the chance to. But when it came to the 3 fights I watched, Mauricio Rufy against Rafael Fiziev was an absolutely showing for Mauricio. Um, what Rufy was able to do in that fight, improving to 13-2 against a Rafael Fiziev. A lot of people who had high in the division, a lot of people had him getting a title shot less than a year or two ago, and he now has struggled over the past year or so, but Mauricio Rufy put together an insanely good fight, standing up on the feet, just looked insanely crisp, especially in that second round when he started really tagging Rafael Fiziev. And he just had good combinations, looked comfortable in the octagon, and uh, looked ready to take on the next level of UFC opponents, which was the big question for Mauricio Rufy, and what his ceiling was in the UFC, and was he ever going to be able to get to that ceiling of title contender? And it's slowly looking like he might get there, as he has put together another amazing win with the knockout of Rafael Fiziev. And then the fight afterwards with Benoit Saint Denis against Dan Hooker. That one was just a beatdown of Dan Hooker. Don't get me wrong, I love Dan Hooker, but Benoit Saint Denis had him figured out, especially in that second round, had him beaten and bruised. And I mean, I think obviously, even though Benoit Saint Denis was below him in the rankings, when you looked at the odds before this one, a lot of people did not like Dan Hooker. I just liked, when I went to the betting for this one, I know Dan Hooker doesn't like to get put out. He doesn't really get put out a lot. And I didn't see the over under was 1.5. And I was like, I don't see this ending in the first round. So I just got to get through 2.5 minutes of round two, and this one will hit. So that's what I went through there. The Rufy Fiziev fight I felt like was going to end in a knockout. So that one was what I went through there, because I know that both those guys are fast, exciting, like to throw. So that one was where I went with there. And then Volkanovski, I knew what Volkanovski was able to do, and he did what he does normally, which is just absolutely put together a masterclass of a point battle. It felt like the exact same thing we saw in the first fight between Diego Lopez and Alexander Volkanovski, which was, don't get me wrong, Diego Lopez had his moments and had a very, very good fight. And if if he's fighting anyone but Alexander Volkanovski, I'm probably going to bet on Diego Lopez with his ability. But with Alexander Volkanovski, he's just such an insanely great fighter, where he's just never in the same spot. He's impossible to track down. His head is never on the center line. He's constantly moving his head. He's constantly moving his body. He's never in the same spot. And he's just so hard to hit and locate and find. So you're sitting there waiting the whole time, and he just tires you out and plays this point game with you, that by the time you get to the rounds 3, 4, 5, you start to either be tired, or you're just so far behind that you have to start extending yourself and really start going for a win. And that's what he did to Diego Lopez yet again. And what he was able to do there was exciting. And we got a big moment there out of him, able to get another title defense. And shout out Alexander Volkanovski going forward. We have a fight night. They asked him what he wanted next. We have a fight night this weekend that is probably for for a title chance. But he's at that point where you get to with a lot of great champions like this, where he's at 8 title defenses, and there's almost nobody left for him. So he's just going to take whatever the UFC gives him. If it's a new guy, it's a new opponent. If he needs to beat someone for a second, third time, he's going to do it, like he just did with Diego Lopez. He's Alexander Volkanovski, man. He's I think, a top 5 fighter of all time. A lot of people have him as their GOAT. You could definitely argue that. He's absolutely ridiculous. So shout out Alexander. Shout out the GOAT, Alexander the Great Volkanovski. As I finish up here, I actually am gonna do something I haven't done. I've had these for a while, so I don't know. I don't know how into cards everyone is. I don't know how many people are here. But I have these Absolute Football 2025s that I picked up about a few weeks ago at Dick's. So I'm going to crack a few of these open, have some fun with that, a little bit of pack opening to end the show. But before I get doing pack opening, stuff like that, I do want to talk about my New York Knicks, baby. I know Connor. I know my brother over here, Connor's in the chat. So I know he's going to be excited when I talk about the Knicks. But the Knicks have been absolutely hot recently. The Knicks have won six straight. Just beating the Lakers last night. Or on Sunday. I apologize. That was not last night. They beat the Lakers on Sunday by 12 in LeBron's possible last game in the Garden. Trailblazers night before. And they've been putting a lot of good games together. You know, when you look at the past 3 games, the big thing that I've been taking away out of the past or not the past 3 games, the 2 games before the Lakers game, sorry. He only had 11 against the Los Angeles, but against the Raptors, against the Blazers, you had 2 games where Karl-Anthony Towns really stepped up in a way that I was excited for, and a lot of people might be questioning what I mean by that because Karl-Anthony Towns, yes, I will be the first one to admit, he has not been having the best season at all this year. He has been struggling, especially those few games when, like, the win in Philadelphia, he struggled. The loss to Dallas, he struggled. The win in Brooklyn, he struggled. Even the win against Sacramento, if I remember correctly, I'm pulling it up right now, but I feel like this was the big one where he struggled. Yeah, he shot 5 for 15, and he struggled, and he has those nights, and he struggled offensively against Portland and against Toronto as well. But what he did do in those 2 games was he was an absolute animal on the boards. Both of those games, he has plus 20 rebounds, and that's what I need to see out of a player like Karl-Anthony Towns. If you're not going to produce offensively like a lot of people expect you to, is you need to be getting 20 rebounds. You need to be getting an insane amount of you need to have that production. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of the times I talk about basketball and I say a lot of obvious stuff because I'm not the most diehard basketball fan and I'm not really like super knowledgeable when it comes to the game, but I do know this, and I do know the obvious stuff, and I do know Karl-Anthony Towns. What you need to do, what we need with this team, is somebody who complements Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges and these other pieces, Josh Hart, that play on the perimeter so much. That's why personally, I love Mitchell Robinson so much because Mitchell Robinson complements this team so well because he just sits down there and he'll get 3 offensive rebounds and just kick it out until we hit a shot. And it's not the most beautiful basketball. I'm not necessarily saying I love that we play basketball that way, but I do think that it's very complimentary to the way that the players on the New York Knicks play basketball. And I think that Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't always necessarily complement that well. But if you're going to go drop 25, 30 a night, go do that offensively. I'll still be happy with it. We'll find ways to complement you as well. But when you're not able to do that, step up and figure out your role. You know what I mean? You don't have to be told your role. You can figure out your role in the game. As the flow and eps of the game go, you can figure out your role. And what your role is in those games that you're not able to score is get some rebounds. You're 7-2, Carl. Cat, you're 7-2. Go get some rebounds and impress me. And the Knicks have been impressing me recently. They're putting it together right as the All-Star break is about to come up, which is nice. And you could go in to the All-Star break with a lot of heat and a lot of momentum, which is great. You have you have a situation where you can go into the All-Star break, even if it's not necessarily on a win streak, on a positive note, winning a few games together, and you can go into this All-Star break, regroup, and really figure out what you need to do with this team. And front office going to the All-Star break, you're gonna have to sit here and focus on what's going on the roster. Obviously, you have so many moves going on around the league with Jaren Jackson getting traded today. You have so many other pieces getting traded throughout the league. What's his name got traded from Cleveland a few days ago. I'm blanking on his name. But you have pieces around the league that are moving now as the trade deadline comes up. So that's what you need to assess right now as this goes on. Is do you want Giannis as everybody wants? You know, that's going to be the talk of the town as this trade deadline starts to come and go. Is going to be, what are the Knicks going to do, and are they going to make the effort for Giannis? And I don't think that necessarily it's a situation that we have seen in the past with the Knicks. I think a lot of the times we've seen this in the past with the Knicks. A lot of people look back at free agencies with Kevin Durant and other stars throughout time with the New York Knicks that they necessarily haven't put all on the table to go get this guy. The Knicks currently do not have what is needed to get this guy. They're going to have to make moves. It's going to have to be a 3-team trade, something like that, to bring Giannis into New York. That includes Karl Anthony Towns going to Milwaukee. Mikal Bridges probably going to Portland, bringing in some Portland picks, bringing in possibly Drew Holiday with those picks and shipping Mikal there, and then shipping those picks with Josh Hart and Cat and a few pieces over to Milwaukee. You're going to have to see that happen at the New York Knicks, and it might not be able to happen. So what you're going to have to do then is shift your focus to taking this roster and finding maybe other pieces, maybe some bench pieces that complement a little bit more. Or you commit to this roster, you take it into the All-Star break, you take it past the trade deadline, and you commit to Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns being your two main pieces to get you to an NBA championship this year. And if you do that, Karl Anthony Towns, you need to sit him down if you're Mike Brown and this coaching staff and tell him that, we would never be happier. We're extremely happy with 5 points and 26 rebounds. Like that's what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to make sure that Karl Anthony Towns it isn't bitching and moaning and crying. It's that simple. Because you can't have that happen. The minute you get back to letting Karl Anthony Towns do what he did at the beginning of the season and not hustling and complaining and doing all of that, then the season's written off. I'm sorry. I will have no hope that the New York Knicks make an NBA Finals if they allow Karl Anthony Towns to play like that. So if you're not going to go get Giannis, which I understand. Obviously, everybody wants Giannis. I get that. But I get that it's too difficult. So I understand not being able to get it, and I understand not pursuing it and taking a step back and evaluating the roster you have and building with that roster. But what you're going to have to do is focus that Karl Anthony Towns is going to hustle, he's going to play, and he's going to play his heart out for this city, because you have players like Mikal Bridges playing like doing things like that, laying his pride on the line and looking into the camera and going, I'm not coachable. And practically, relaying to the media and relaying to everybody out there that he wants to be a New York Knick. He wants to be here, and he is willing to do whatever it takes to be here. You see players like Josh Hart sitting there, and when Cat's not hustling, he's yelling at him to get back on defense. That's what we need, and we need Karl Anthony Towns to snap into it, whether that be a sit-down with Mike Brown or whatever it is, and have him play a hustle side of the ball, have him play physically if he's not going to be able to score. It's okay. That's what he needs to understand, because he's so used to being such an important scorer. He's so used to being such a better team, such a more important piece of the team offensively, scoring-wise. And you have to establish with him his mentality that we don't need you to score every night. We have one of the most clutch and one of the best scorers in the league in a guard in Jalen Brunson. What we need you to do is make up for the production that he is lacking in. We need you to have those nights where you have 5 points and 22 rebounds. And yes, maybe you're shooting 5 for 15, but that doesn't stop you from having 24 rebounds and 9 assists. That's what they need out of that. You know what I mean? I think when we look at the Giannis situation, Connor, I see you in the chat saying Miami. I don't think Miami really has the draft capital. I think the more likely or not situation, honestly enough, and I think it's gonna be a surprise to many, is I think he ends up in Portland. I think Portland ships all those picks. They have young talent there that can improve. That is very nice. They have Damian Lillard. They have Drew Holiday. They have a lot of players that he likes to play with. I think Portland's a very underrated location for Giannis. I don't really see him in Miami. I think LA is possible with the Clippers and everything there with James Harden. I think there's a lot of situations with Giannis that are very, very plausible. And I will agree with a lot of people that I think the Knicks are the bottom of the list there. But I think that breaking it down and looking at the whole situation of the New York Knicks, going back to what I was saying there, it's very much you should take a break and make sure that Karl Anthony Towns isn't going to be a cancer to this team going forward, because if he is, you have no chance of going anywhere. You're done. You know what I mean? You're having 4v5 in transition. You can't have it. You can't have it. You can't. You can't win a championship at all. It's that simple. That's how I feel about the Knicks, though. Oh, actually, before I open these cards, one last thing I do want to talk about is my alma mater, because I looked over here at the confetti. Talk about teams putting wins together. St. John's poll came out today. Now back in the top 25 again, ranked number 22. They played 8 o'clock tonight against DePaul, which should be a win. They have put together 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to say it's 7. Yeah, 7 straight wins as they go for their 8th straight win tonight against DePaul in DePaul. And then it all leads to a gigantic matchup on Friday night in Madison Square Garden that I will be at. That is also, surprisingly enough, One Piece night. As you guys can tell, I'm a huge One Piece fan. St. John's versus UConn for top spot in the Big East. Both teams have been playing well. St. John's has been absolutely on fire recently, most of which has been behind the Dylan Mitchell off the bench has been playing absolutely insane, as well as Dylan Darling have both felt like heartbeats for this St. John's team throughout the year. Obviously, Zuby has done his thing, but Dylan Mitchell, Dylan Darling over this past 2 weeks, these past 7 games have been a huge part to the team. Players like Ruben Prey have been playing absolutely insane as well. The team has just finally been clicking together and getting some big wins as they honestly lead up to their biggest game of the season on Friday after their game tonight in DePaul at home against UConn, and I will be there. I can't wait. Stay tuned to the TikTok and stuff like that for content about that game, but I cannot wait to see how that goes. But yeah, on that, why not, guys? Let's open some cards. They've been sitting here. I've been wanting to make some content with these, so why not open some cards, right, guys? I should be able to get it open, right? Yep, I ripped it open. Let's see if we get anything good these days, boys. Let's see. As you guys see, I got some cards on the set, Some of them have been given to me. Some of them I have pulled myself. Most of them on the set, at least, were given to me. But let's see how these absolute football packs go. It's already 3:15, so I think we're just going to open one pack for today. And we'll see how this goes. They got 8 cards in them. Here's how the packs look for everybody who's interested. Actually, you know what I could do? Let's get a little closer. Look at this slow pan. Dun, dun, dun. Let's get a little closer here so you guys can actually see what I am pulling here. This could be a dud for all I know. You guys could be sitting here hoping I open this pack and dud. Let's see who we pull here. All right. Ooh, we got a nice Woody Marks rookie card. The Woody Marks shiny, nice shiny rookie card there. Breece Hall. Brian Thomas Hog Heaven. I don't know if this is worth anything, but this is a cool looking card. I like this one. All right. Brandon Ayuk. Didn't play a lick of football this year. A nice Cortland Sutton. All right. DJ Moore. Lamar. All right, got some Lamar in here. Josh Jacobs to finish it off. So we got a nice, we got 2 out of that pack. We got the Brian Thomas Hog Heaven, the BTJ Hog Heaven, and the Woody Marks rookie card. You know what? That was fun. Let's open another one real quick. Let's get a second pack. There's 6 packs in this box. I'm probably going to buy another box for content because I might open a pack off camera after this next pack. So to start this one, we started with the Matthew Golden rookie card. All right. The Matthew Golden rookie card. Oh, and then we get another beautiful rookie card. This one's numbered. This one we got a 315 out of 825. Alumifi Aladuju, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I can't pronounce his name. But that's this one on the Tennessee Titans. That's a nice little looking rookie card there. Nice Roma Dunze. Marv. Trey McBride, his teammate. All right, all right. JT. B-Rob. Brian Robinson Jr. before the trade. And then Ramondre. Oh, that was fun. That was a little fun, guys. That was fun. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. I'm happy I got everything running on the OBS. All it took was me completely resetting my laptop, but we'll talk about that on a different day. I have all the files backed up on my iCloud, so we're fine. I ain't need any files on here anyway. I need this to stream is what I need it for. I need it to be here for you guys, my fans. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We had that fun little unboxing at the end there. I will see you guys next week post Super Bowl. We get it this weekend, the end of the NFL season, Super Bowl 60. Let me know who you guys think is going to win. You know, tweet at me. Do it all. I'm going to get active over there too soon on Twitter. So follow me over there at LikeEb10 on Twitter. Follow me on TikTok, all of that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I'm happy everything was able to go smoothly. I will see you guys next week. Peace out.